The wind howled through the empty streets of Cedar Flats as rancher Sam Carter stepped off his horse. He hadn't set foot in town in 10 years, not since he left everything behind. But when his eyes landed on the crowd gathered near the old saloon, his blood ran cold. There, standing on a wooden crate with a rope around her wrist, was Emily, the woman he once loved. And the sheriff was calling out bids like she was nothing more than cattle. $2, a man shouted. Sam's fists clenched. This wasn't just an auction. This was revenge. Sam Carter hadn't planned on stopping in Cedar Flats. He just needed supplies, flour, bullets, maybe a bottle of whiskey to numb the loneliness. But the moment he saw her, time stopped. Emily Hayes, her sun-faded dress fluttering in the dusty wind, stood on that crate like a condemned prisoner. The sheriff, a thick-necked man named Briggs, smirked as he held the rope tied around her wrist. Next bid gets her. Briggs barked. The crowd laughed, but Sam saw the fear in Emily's eyes. He pushed through the crowd, his boots kicking up dirt. What in hell's name is going on here? Sam's voice cut through the noise. The laughter died. Briggs turned, his hand resting on his pistol. Well, well. Sam Carter. Heard you ran off to play cowboy. Sam ignored him, his eyes locked on Emily. She looked older, tired, but still the girl he'd once promised the world to. Sam, she whispered, like she didn't believe he was real. Briggs grinned. Miss Hayes here owes a debt. Town rules say she works it off, one way or another. Sam's jaw tightened. He knew Briggs had always hated the Hayes family. This wasn't about money. It was about power. Without a word, Sam pulled $2 silver from his pocket and tossed them in the dirt. She's coming with me. The crowd gasped. Briggs' face turned red. Ain't that simple, Carter? Sam didn't blink. It is now. Sam didn't wait for Briggs to make another move. He grabbed Emily's wrist and pulled her behind him, his other hand hovering near his revolver. The crowd parted like scared sheep, their murmurs fading into the wind. Emily stumbled, her breath ragged. Sam, you don't know what you're doing, she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. His mind was a storm, 10 years of regret, anger, and questions he'd buried under hard work and solitude. Now, all of it roared back to life. They reached his horse, but before Sam could help Emily up, a rifle cocked behind them. Turn around real slow, Carter. The voice was smooth, almost amused. Sam knew it before he even turned, Tom Riker, Briggs' right-hand man and the best shot in 3 counties. Riker leaned against a post, his rifle lazily pointed at Sam's chest. Sheriff said you'd cause trouble. Guess he was right. Sam's fingers flexed. He could draw, but Riker wouldn't miss. Emily's grip tightened on his arm. Please, she said, not to Sam, but to Riker. You know this ain't right. Riker's smirk faltered for half a second, just long enough for Sam to notice. Then it was back. Ain't about right or wrong, Emily. It's about the law. Sam scoffed. Since when does the law sell people? Riker's eyes flickered, something uneasy there, something Sam hadn't expected. Before he could press it, Briggs' voice cut through the tension. Enough talk. The sheriff stomped forward, his face purple with rage. You think you can waltz back in here and undo 10 years, Carter? You think you're some kind of hero? Sam met his glare. I think you're a coward hiding behind a badge. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Briggs' hand twitched toward his pistol, then stopped. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. Fine. Take her. But you ain't leaving town. Not till you settle your own debts. Sam frowned. What debts? Briggs pulled a yellowed paper from his coat and tossed it at Sam's feet. It was a wanted poster, Sam's face, his name, and a charge for cattle rustling. You forgot about this, didn't you? Judge sentenced you in absentia. You're a fugitive, Carter. And in my town, fugitives hang. Emily gasped. That's a lie. Sam was gone by then. Briggs shrugged. Ain't my problem. Either he turns himself in by sundown, or I put a bullet in him right here. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. And anyone who helps him? Same fate. The people shuffled back, eyes down. Sam stared at the poster, his stomach twisting. He'd known Briggs was dirty, but this? This was a death sentence wrapped in legal paper. Emily tugged his sleeve. We have to run, she breathed. Sam shook his head. Won't get far. His mind raced. There had to be another way. Then he noticed Riker again. The man hadn't moved, hadn't raised his rifle higher. And that look in his eyes. Sam took a gamble. Riker, he said quietly. You really gonna let him do this? For a long second, no one moved. Then Riker lowered his rifle an inch. Sheriff, he said, maybe we ought to talk about this first. Briggs whirled on him. You talking his side now? Riker's jaw tightened. I'm talking the side that don't end with a lynching. The crowd stirred, uneasy. Briggs looked around, sensing the shift. His voice turned oily. Fine. Carter, you got till sundown. Then I come for you. He spat in the dirt and stormed off, Riker trailing behind. Emily exhaled shakily. Sam, we need to, I know, he interrupted. But his eyes were on Riker's retreating back. Something wasn't adding up. Why would a man like Riker hesitate? And why did Briggs care so much about an old rustling charge? Unless, it wasn't about the cattle at all. Emily followed his gaze. You think Riker's on our side? Sam shook his head. Ain't sure. But I think he knows something. He picked up the wanted poster, studying the date. The week after he'd left town. The week after the fire at the Hayes Ranch. His blood went cold. Emily. He said slowly. Who signed this warrant? She took the paper, her hands shaking. Then her face paled. Judge Holloway. But, he died years ago. Sam's grip tightened. Then who's Briggs working for? A gunshot echoed in the distance. Both of them flinched. It wasn't a warning. It was a signal. And suddenly, Sam understood. This wasn't just about him or Emily. Someone else was pulling the strings. Someone who'd been waiting 10 years for this moment. The gunshot's echo still hung in the air as Sam pulled Emily into the shadowed alley between the general store and blacksmith's shop. His mind raced faster than a spooked Mustang, piecing together fragments of memories he tried to forget. The fire at the Hayes Ranch hadn't been an accident, he'd always suspected as much, but left before he could prove it. Now, with this forged warrant and Briggs' unnatural interest in Emily, the pieces were coming together in ways that turned his stomach. Emily's breath came in short gasps as she pressed against the rough wooden wall. Sam, we can't stay here, she whispered, her eyes darting toward the street where voices were growing louder. They'll search every building once they realize we're gone. Sam nodded, but his attention was fixed on the date scrawled at the bottom of the wanted poster, April 12, 1878. Exactly 1 week after he'd ridden out of Cedar Flats, and 3 days after the fire that killed Emily's father. The timing couldn't be coincidence. A sudden commotion erupted from the direction of the saloon, horses whinnying, men shouting orders. Sam risked a glance around the corner and saw Briggs organizing search parties, his face twisted in anger as he waved the wanted poster in the air. What struck Sam most was Riker standing slightly apart from the group, his expression unreadable as he methodically checked his revolver. There was something deliberate in his movements, something that didn't match the urgency of the other men. Emily followed Sam's gaze. And stiffened. He's different from the others, she murmured, almost to herself. Last winter when I was sick, he left medicine on my porch. Never said a word about it. Sam's eyebrows rose. That didn't fit the Tom Riker he remembered, a cold-eyed gunslinger who'd always been Briggs' shadow. The sound of boots on gravel sent them both deeper into the alley's darkness. Sam's hand found the familiar weight of his Colt as two townsmen passed by, one complaining loudly about missing supper for this wild goose chase. Their voices faded, but Sam waited an extra minute before speaking. "Emily, who owned the land your ranch was on before your pa?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. The railroad, I think. Pa bought it cheap when their route changed." "Why?" Sam's jaw tightened. "And who was the agent who sold it to him?" Emily frowned, thinking. "Old man Wilkins, but she stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. "He died right after the sale. They said heart failure, but—" Sam nodded grimly. "But nobody questioned it because he was ancient. Just like nobody questioned the fire being an accident." A new voice spoke from the darkness behind them. "Because some questions get men killed." Sam whirled, gun drawn, but stopped when he saw Riker leaning against the back wall of the blacksmith's, his rifle cradled casually in his arms. Emily gasped, but Riker made no move to raise his weapon. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Carter," he said quietly. "But you're digging in the wrong dirt." Sam kept his revolver steady. "Then point me to the right pile." Riker's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Wilkins didn't just sell one parcel to Hayes. He sold 3, all along the new rail route that got cancelled. Problem was, the railroad didn't actually cancel that route. Somebody just made it look that way." Emily made a small, distressed noise. "You're saying my father was cheated?" Riker shook his head. "Worse. He was murdered for land that's about to become very valuable again." Sam felt the pieces click together. "The railroad's coming back." Riker nodded. "Surveyors were spotted 2 weeks ago. Word is, they're announcing the new route next month, right through the Hayes property, what's left of it." Sam's mind raced. "And with Emily gone?" "The land goes to the county," Riker finished. "Where certain people have friends who'll sell it cheap to certain investors." The implications hit Sam like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about revenge or petty grudges, it was about money, big money. Enough to kill 4. Enough to forge legal documents and rig auctions. Enough to make a sheriff into a murderer. Riker pushed off from the wall, his expression turning serious. "Briggs is just the hired gun in this. The real power sits in the territorial governor's office." Sam's blood ran cold. Harlan Greer. The name tasted like poison. Greer had been a minor politician when Sam left, ambitious, ruthless, but small-time. Apparently, he'd climbed higher than anyone expected. Riker checked the street again before continuing. "Greer's been buying up all the land along the old route for years, using front men and fake companies. The Hayes parcel was the last piece he needed." Emily's voice shook with anger. "So he burned us out and thought that was the end of it?" Riker's face darkened. "He didn't count on you surviving. Or coming back." His eyes flicked to Sam. "Or Carter here showing up like some ghost from the past to complicate things." A shout came from the direction of the livery stable, followed by the sound of splintering wood as doors were kicked open. They were running out of time. Riker made a decision, his posture shifting. "There's a canyon trail 2 miles east of here, old Indian path, barely visible. Take it north to the abandoned mission. I'll meet you there at moonrise with supplies." Sam hesitated. "Why help us?" For the first time, Riker looked uncertain. "Let's just say I owe a debt to the Hayes family too." Before Sam could ask what he meant, Riker melted back into the shadows, leaving them with more questions than answers. Emily grabbed Sam's arm. "Do we trust him?" Sam holstered his gun. "No. But we're out of options. They moved silently through the back alleys, keeping to the lengthening shadows as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Every creak of wood, every scuff of their boots on dirt sounded thunderous to Sam's ears. His mind kept returning to Greer, a man who'd always played the long game. If he was behind this, why leave loose ends like Emily alive for 10 years? And why involve Briggs so openly now? Unless Emily wasn't the loose end. The realization hit Sam like a bucket of cold water. He stopped so abruptly Emily nearly ran into him. It's not about the land, he breathed. Not entirely. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Sam turned to her, his voice low and urgent. Your father kept records, didn't he? Deeds, contracts, correspondence. Emily nodded slowly. In his strongbox. But it burned with everything else. Sam shook his head. Unless he had copies somewhere safe. Understanding dawned in Emily's eyes. The bank vault in Silver City. He used to make trips there every few months. Her voice trailed off as the implications sank in. Sam's pulse quickened. If those documents proved Greer's fraud, they'd be worth more than gold, and more dangerous than a loaded gun. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell began to toll, its mournful sound carrying across the town. 5 slow chimes. 1 hour until sundown. 1 hour until Briggs came hunting. Sam took Emily's hand. We need to get to Silver City. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. Greer would have men watching every road, every stagecoach, every train. And Briggs wouldn't be the only one with a warrant for Sam's arrest. As they reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open scrubland, Sam spotted movement near the cemetery gate. A lone figure leaned against the wrought iron, face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. Sam's hand went to his gun, but the figure made no hostile move. Instead, they lifted something small and metallic that caught the fading light, a sheriff's star. Then, with deliberate slowness, the figure dropped it into the dirt and ground it under their boot before disappearing into the gathering dusk. The abandoned mission loomed ahead like a skeleton against the purple twilight, its crumbling adobe walls casting jagged shadows across the dusty courtyard. Sam reined in his horse at the edge of the tree line, every sense alert for ambush. 10 years of living as a wanted man had taught him this much: supposed sanctuaries often became traps. Emily shifted behind him, her arms tightening around his waist as she peered over his shoulder. You think Riker's already here? Sam shook his head slowly, his eyes scanning the broken windows where moonlight glinted off jagged glass. If he's smart, he's waiting to see if we were followed. The words barely left his mouth when a rock clattered somewhere to their left. Sam's hand went to his revolver, but it was only a scrawny coyote darting between the sagebrush. Still, the tension didn't leave his shoulders. Something about this place set his teeth on edge, not just the silence, but the weight of history pressing down on the ruined chapel. They dismounted near what remained of the mission stable, the wooden beams sagging like an old man's spine. Sam kept Emily behind him as they picked their way through debris, shattered pottery, rusted tools, the occasional animal bone bleached white by the sun. The smell of dry rot and something faintly metallic hung in the air. Emily suddenly gripped Sam's arm, her fingers digging in. Look, she whispered, pointing to the chapel doorway. At first Sam saw nothing, then the moonlight caught it, a thin wire stretched ankle-high across the threshold, nearly invisible against the dirt. His blood ran cold. That wasn't Riker's doing. Briggs' men didn't use traps. Which meant someone else knew they'd come here. A boot scraped stone behind them. Sam spun, drawing his Colt in one fluid motion, only to find Riker standing 3 paces away with his hands raised. The gunslinger's face looked drawn in the pale light, his usual smirk replaced by grim lines. Took you long enough, he muttered, nodding toward the wire. That's new. And before you ask, not mine. Emily stepped forward, her voice shaking with barely contained anger. Then who's trying to kill us now? Riker's eyes flicked toward the horizon where the first stars were appearing. Greer didn't get where he is by leaving loose ends. He's got men everywhere, stagecoach guards, telegraph operators, even some of the railroad bulls. He reached into his coat and Sam tensed, but Riker only pulled out a folded map. Silver City's crawling with them. You'll never get near that bank vault. Sam studied the map under the moonlight, tracing alternative routes with a calloused finger. Every road, every back trail was marked with small red X's. These? Riker's jaw tightened. Checkpoints. Greer's had them watching for Emily since the fire. Something in his tone made Sam look up sharply. You knew about this all along. It wasn't a question. For a long moment, Riker didn't answer. Then he exhaled through his nose like a man making a decision. My brother worked for the land office. He was the one who discovered the forged survey documents. Emily made a small, shocked sound. The clerk who died in that robbery. Riker's nod was barely perceptible. Wasn't a robbery. Greer made sure nobody believed a drunk gambler over a respected official. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. Sam glanced back at the booby-trapped doorway, then at the map in his hands. So what's your play, Riker? Revenge? To his surprise, the gunslinger almost smiled. Call it professional courtesy. Greer thinks he's untouchable. I like proving men wrong. He reached into his saddlebag and tossed Sam a bundle, a deputy star wrapped in a faded bandana. Sam unfolded it with numb fingers, recognizing the scratched metal immediately. This is, the one your father wore, Riker finished for Emily. Found it in Briggs' desk after he arrested you today. Thought you might want it back. Emily took the star with trembling hands, her thumb brushing over the tarnished surface. When she spoke, her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. We're not running to Silver City. Both men turned to her in surprise. She met their gazes unflinchingly. If Greer wants those documents so badly, let him come for them. But we'll choose the battlefield. Sam saw the fire in her eyes, the same stubbornness that had made him fall for her all those years ago, and felt something long dormant stir in his chest. Riker rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You're talking about the old mining camp. Ghost Canyon. It wasn't a question. Sam's breath caught. Ghost Canyon was a natural fortress, narrow entrance, high walls, and more importantly, the last place anyone would expect them to go. But Emily was already shaking her head. Better. The rail depot at Dry Fork. Now Riker looked genuinely impressed. Where Greer's shipping all the equipment for his big announcement. Sam's mind raced ahead, seeing the plan take shape. We hit him where it hurts, in front of his investors, his political allies. Emily's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. With proof. A sudden noise from the mission's bell tower had all three of them reaching for weapons. A loose shutter banged in the wind, nothing more, but the tension didn't ease. Riker checked his pocket watch with a frown. Briggs will have figured out you're gone by now. We need to move. He started toward the horses, then paused, looking back at Emily with an unreadable expression. One thing you should know, Greer's not the only one coming. He's bringing. A gunshot cracked through the night, splintering the wood next to Riker's head. They dove for cover as more shots rang out, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness beyond the mission walls. Sam rolled behind a crumbling wall, pulling Emily down beside him. How many? Riker crouched nearby, reloading with practiced efficiency. Too many for a straight fight. His eyes met Sam's. Back way out. There's a tunnel under the altar, mission priests used it during Apache raids. Another volley of shots peppered their cover, sending chunks of adobe flying. Emily gasped as a sliver grazed her cheek, leaving a thin red line. Sam felt something hot and primal uncoil in his gut. Go, he growled at Riker. Get her to the tunnel. I'll cover you. But Emily grabbed his arm with surprising strength. No. We stick to the plan, all of us. Her eyes burned with determination. This ends at Dry Fork. A bullet whined past close enough to stir Sam's hair. He knew she was right, but the thought of letting her out of his sight now made his hands shake. Riker solved the dilemma by tossing him a second revolver from his belt. Then we'd better move fast. On 3. The world exploded in noise and motion. Sam came up firing, aiming for the muzzle flashes as Riker and Emily sprinted toward the chapel. Something hot seared across his ribs, a bullet graze, but he barely felt it. He was vaguely aware of shouts, of at least one body falling in the darkness, then he was moving too, boots pounding on ancient stone as he followed the others through the rotting doors. The chapel interior was pitch black except for slivers of moonlight through the cracks. Sam nearly tripped over a broken pew before strong hands grabbed his vest, Riker, pulling him toward the altar. Emily was already prying up a section of the floorboards, revealing a yawning black hole beneath. The smell of damp earth and old fear rose from the darkness. More gunfire shattered the remaining stained glass windows, sending colored shards raining down like deadly confetti. Riker didn't hesitate, he jumped into the hole, disappearing into the black. Emily gave Sam one last desperate look before following. Sam took a final shot at the shapes moving in the doorway, then dropped through the opening just as the altar exploded in splinters above him. The tunnel was tight, the air thick with the scent of mold and rat droppings. Sam's shoulders scraped both walls as he half ran, half stumbled forward, guided only by the sound of Emily's breathing ahead. Somewhere behind them, boots pounded on the chapel floor, their pursuers had found the entrance. Then Riker's voice came from up ahead, tight with urgency, "Bridge is out." Sam's heart lurched. He pushed forward until he nearly collided with the others at the edge of a gaping void where the tunnel floor should have been. Moonlight filtered through a crack in the ceiling 20 feet above, revealing the problem. A section of the tunnel had collapsed, leaving a 10-foot chasm with only a few rotting beams spanning the gap. The first of their pursuers reached the tunnel entrance behind them. A voice echoed off the narrow walls, one Sam recognized with a chill. "Briggs. Light them torches. I want Carter's head on a pike." Emily turned to Sam, her face pale in the dim light. "Now what?" Riker was already testing one of the beams with his boot. It groaned ominously but held. He looked back at them, and for the first time, Sam saw real fear in the gunslinger's eyes. "Only one way across. And only one of us is making it to Dry Fork." The rotting beam creaked under Riker's weight as he balanced precariously over the chasm. Behind them, torchlight flickered against the tunnel walls. Briggs and his men were closing in fast. Sam's mind raced. If only one of them could cross, who would it be? Emily clutched his arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sam, the documents in Silver City, they're not in the bank." He turned sharply. "What?" Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "Pa gave them to someone he trusted. Sheriff Tate." Riker froze mid-step. "Tate? He's been dead for..." Another gunshot rang out, ricocheting off the tunnel walls. Time was up. Sam made his decision. He grabbed Riker's arm and pulled him back. "You know the land deals better than anyone. Get to Dry Fork." Then, before Emily could protest, he pressed his father's deputy star into her hand. "And you know Tate's hiding spots. Find those papers." Emily's face crumpled. "But you..." Sam cut her off with a kiss, brief but fierce. "I'll hold them here." Riker hesitated only a second before nodding. "Give us 2 hours." Then he was dragging Emily across the shuddering beams, leaving Sam alone in the tunnel with his Colts and a handful of bullets. As their footsteps faded, Sam turned to face the approaching torches. He didn't bother hiding, just stood tall in the center of the tunnel, revolvers drawn. Briggs emerged from the shadows, his face twisted in triumph. "End of the line, Carter." Sam smirked. "Funny. I was about to say the same to you. The shootout that followed would be whispered about for years, how Sam Carter took 6 men with him that night, how Briggs crawled away with a belly wound that would kill him slowly, how the tunnel collapsed behind them, sealing the truth underground. But that wasn't the real story. The twist. 3 days later, a bandaged but alive Sam Carter limped into Dry Fork just as Governor Greer stood to make his railroad announcement. The crowd gasped when Emily Hayes stepped forward, not with land deeds, but with Sheriff Tate's long-lost journal, pages detailing Greer's murders, bribes, and the real railroad route that would make his land purchases worthless. Riker appeared beside her, holding a very much alive Sheriff Tate at gunpoint. "Seems you buried the wrong lawman, Governor," he drawled. As the territorial marshals moved in, Sam met Emily's eyes across the crowd. The documents hadn't been the key, it was Tate's testimony all along. Her father had protected the man, not the papers. Moral lesson. The truth might hide in shadows, but it never disappears. And sometimes, the debts we think we owe aren't nearly as important as the loyalties we choose to keep. Epilogue. The sun set over a rebuilt Hayes Ranch, its new fences stretching toward the horizon where railroad tracks would soon run, legally, this time. Sam leaned against the porch rail, wincing as his healing wound pulled. Emily slipped an arm around him, pressing Tate's old journal into his hands. "Page 47, she murmured. Sam read the faded writing. "If you're reading this, Ellie girl, know that some men fight for justice, others for love." Sam Carter was always both. Outside, a harmonica played a familiar tune, Riker, saddling up to ride west. Some stories end. Others just find new trails.